Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I am interviewing the amazing Arliss Dudley-Cash. Arliss came on to share her story with us. She grew up always being different, always feeling different, always looking different. And this sort of being different, not fitting in, even though she came from an absolutely wonderful family, this manifested in all different areas of her life and really impacted everything. In her late 20s, she overcame this. She began the journey into self-love, and she is now a #1 international best-selling author. She's a business consultant and self-love coach. She's also a speaker, and she is a movement leader with a background in business, neuroscience, and forensics. Her career spans over many different industries, and she takes this eclectic background and her personal journey and brings it together to create change. Arliss is really inspiring, and she is incredible at explaining self-love, at explaining this journey, at explaining some really tangible, practical things that you can do to help yourself step more and more into self-love every day. So without further ado, jump on in and meet Arliss. My name is Katie Allen, and this is Self-Love Ignited. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, oh good, first sentence in. On today's episode, I am interviewing Arliss Dudley-Cash. Arliss, I'm really excited to have you here with me. Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, so my name is Arliss. I'm a business coach and a self-love coach and a body positivity co-host. And I reside in Waimea, Hawaii on the Big Island. And it was a really interesting route to get to where I am in life through forensics and operations management and jewelry. And life is really interesting. And now I'm a published author and a speaker, and I'm super stoked to be here on the podcast with you.
That is awesome. I absolutely love what you are doing in the world. I don't even remember how we met. It was like last year sometime we were introduced through I think it was Diana, wasn't it? She introduced us. Diana, who was another podcast guest last year, who is your business partner. She introduced us. And as soon as I sort of, met you, was introduced to you and your story, I was like, ooh, I need to have her on. I need to have her on. So I'm really happy that we finally got here.
Yeah, and we are super excited to have you on our podcast too in about a month. So when I met you, I just felt such a connection, and I love what you do in the world as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So this podcast, Self-Love Ignited, this is all about, telling the stories of women just like you who have come from a place of not liking parts of themselves, not loving parts of themselves, to really like embracing all of who they are. So I would love to start at the beginning of your story. Where did your challenges with yourself begin?
Such a great question. It began really young. So I was really young. I was always a little bit different. So everybody in my family had dark hair, dark eyes, and I was blonde and blue-eyed. So that kind of set me apart right away. And it started the conversation from a very young age of, are these your parents? Are you related to your siblings? That sort of thing. I remember that from a young age. And then when I got to about 8, 9 years old, I started to grow much faster than those around me, grow out and grow up. So I became a bigger child than the other children around me. And it was like very, very noticeable. And I was teased quite a bit. And even up until, going into high school, by the time I was 10 years old, I was 12 years old, I was 5'7", and over 200 pounds. And even though I didn't have, roles or anything like that happening, I was still like literally heads, like multiple heads taller than my classmates. And so I just felt very out of place. I felt very abnormal, if you will. And it, at one point, it got so bad in one of my schools, the teasing, that I had to leave the school and go to a different school. And so from that place, I took it so personally, and I made it all about me. It didn't occur to me in my young mind to think, oh, these individuals are having challenges of their own. They're not able to process their emotion because they're children. They're looking for ways to fit in themselves. And so they're finding a focal point to take that out on. It happens to be me, but it could have been anybody else, And so I internalized all of that. And that was my running dialogue, that I was fat or big or ugly or whatever those words were, until I was well into my adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah. And when that starts, when you're so little, like you said, it was right from your earliest age, simply because you had, blonde hair and blue eyes, right? Like there was always a difference. And then as you grow, the differences may have changed, but it almost became more profound, right? More obvious to others. Yeah. Yeah. So tell us, how did that follow you into adulthood? Was this influencing your relationships, your friendships, your career path? Like, because I know for me, it influenced absolutely everything, right? So what was the sort of flow-on effects of this feeling?
It affected everything. And I think that I don't know how it couldn't. And I think that the biggest way that it affected all parts of my life is because I felt so unworthy of love. I felt so unworthy of acknowledgement or success. And what that did for me, and I know this has a different effect on each person, is I felt so much pressure to prove myself. And so I thought, if I could just achieve this, whatever this is, then I would finally be worthy of love. I would finally be able to show myself that I'm okay. I'm an okay person, and that other people would see that too. I overworked myself in every way. So I played soccer and softball and basketball and rode horses and played tennis. I took, in college, I took 35 units a quarter, when, you're required to take 15. I took on jobs. So I worked in forensics. I still have a lot of love for the people that work in forensics and the work that is done. But I took a job that was emotionally very challenging and in some ways scarring for me to go through, as a way to prove myself. And in my relationships and friendships, I always overgave. I over complimented. I didn't receive love very well, or receive friendship or kindness very well. And I was always talking about my accomplishments to my partner at the time or my parents. And what's really interesting is, so many people, when they go through this process, a lot of them talk about having unsupportive parents, or a lot of that coming from their parents. And I had amazing parents. I had amazing parents that told me that they loved me every day, that told me I was beautiful, that my father quit his job to help to raise me so that my mom could work, so even like a really dynamic, forward-thinking family structure. And this still happened in my life.
Right. Yeah. And I think that you make a good point there, right? It's like everybody comes from their own place. And for some people, it's like traumatic childhoods, or, unsupportive parents, or lack of family structure. And it's like, even if you have those things like you did, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have these challenges, right? It's like every single one of us comes into this world with our own unique set of challenges and gifts, and there is no magic formula that is going to make you like love yourself or feel great in your body, right? Like every single person is going to have their own unique experience. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And my challenges really came from my negative experience in school with the other students. Even my teachers were awesome, so I think that when having an open mind the way that you do to allow people to tell their story without judgment is so important, because the stories aren't all cookie cutter, and sometimes they're not hugely traumatic. It's not like, I have this story of a hugely traumatic singular event happening. It was like a slow drip effect over many years of my life.
I've never heard it explained like that before, but that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it really does. So here you were in like your teenage years, going into your 20s, taking jobs that were emotionally draining, trying to prove yourself, doing all of these things, right? There was like this lack, and you were always trying to like make it more, make yourself more. What did you do? Because the woman sitting here today who I'm speaking to is not that person, right? Like you are changed drastically. What did you do to overcome that? What did that journey look like for you?
I would love to say that one day I had this beautiful epiphany and that I just started practicing self-love. And that's not the case. I overworked and overdid and really harmed myself through my self-hate to the point where my health declined, and I was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition, which I'd had my whole life, which explains a lot of why my body was so different growing up, actually. And when I was diagnosed, I was also told that I only had about a year to live. And I'll say that in itself wasn't even a wake-up call at that moment. I then turned my obsessive need to prove myself towards figuring out what I had. It wasn't until about 6 months or a year later when I finally was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I'm killing myself.
Yeah.
I am, I have this genetic condition that was, obviously playing a role in what was happening, but all of this overdoing is literally causing my death to happen. And that was my wake-up call. And it's one of the reasons why I talk about it now. And I, with you, and I write about it in the books that I've been a co-author in and in my coaching, is because I don't want anybody else to have to put their life on the line to get the lesson that I got, which is that we're all lovable, just as we are right now, no matter what we do ever in life. We are lovable right now. And that act is the most sacred act that we will ever do in our lives.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I'm curious, do you, and I suspect I know your answer based on what you've already said, but do you identify with the term self-love? Does that feel true to you? And if so, did it always feel true to you, or was there a transition period for you?
Yeah, I don't believe in toxic positivity,
Okay.
which I know in like the self-love world, when I say those words, a lot of people cringe and they're like, oh, what is she talking about? Love is a full spectrum emotion. Okay. So when I first heard the term self-love, I thought that meant that in every single moment of my life that I had to feel positive about myself, that I had to like what I was choosing or what was going on or what I saw in the mirror, that I had to agree with all aspects of my being in that moment. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's toxic, because that's not love. If anybody has been in love with somebody, or a shared love in a friendship, or shared love with a parent, then you know that there are times where you don't like that person very much. You may not agree with what they're saying. You may look at what they're dressed in and be like, oh, that looks odd. Like, we have the full range of emotion. And so self-love for me, when I thought that it had everything to do with just blind acceptance, right? Just blind acceptance of positivity. I didn't resonate with that.
Yeah.
Now with where I am, what I know is it's not blind acceptance of positivity. It's acceptance of who I am and where I am now, as I am now, even if I don't really like it sometimes, even if it doesn't feel comfortable sometimes, even if I feel judgy sometimes, even if I'm making decisions that I don't agree with later. It's accepting that I'm doing my best in this moment, that even in those times where I don't feel that positive about myself, I'm still worthy of loving myself.
Yeah. 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 That I love that how you describe this, because I think you're right. I think saying that you don't believe in toxic positivity, especially in this space, that's like, ooh, you're going to tread on some toes. But when you explain it the way you do, when you explain it in, like you said, love is a full spectrum emotion, and there's lots of ups and downs, and it doesn't mean that you like everything or agree with everything or that you're always positive, but that love is it's like the foundation, it's the undercurrent of everything, and it is a non-negotiable. And like, yes, absolutely, that is beautifully articulated. Yeah. On your own journey to get where you are today, what tools or practices or exercises, like some tangible things, like if there's somebody listening going, okay, that sounds great, but like, what do I actually do? What were some things that helped you along this journey?
Recognizing what I appreciated about myself, which is a subset of gratitude. Gratitude is spoken about a lot as an important part of daily self-care or even daily self-love. And I do think that gratitude for what we have in our life is very important. I think in self-love, though, what we appreciate about ourselves is far more important, because we don't think about that. Almost all the time when somebody sits down and makes a gratitude list, it's totally external, has nothing to do with what's inside them. Yeah. I'm grateful for the tea I had this morning. I'm grateful for the lemon gelato that I, got to taste, or whatever it is. And when we sit down and write, what are 3 things I really appreciate about myself? And this is something I ask every single one of my clients in every single session. They know it's coming. I have clients that I have coached for, almost a year now, and they still have to pause. It still makes them really think, and they can't come up with something all the time really quickly, right? And so when we can sit down and write down 3 things each day that we really appreciate about ourselves, it really turns that focus to feeling that love for who we are in this world. So I think that that's a really important tool that is free, right? It's totally free. Another one is meditation. So getting to a place where I could sit with myself. Now, that doesn't mean that thoughts, emotions, feelings, whatever don't come up, but just being there with myself. And there's all different kinds of meditation. So meditation does not mean twisting yourself into a pretzel on a poofy cushion in silence for 4 hours. Yeah. I know a lot of people that feel like if they can't do that, then they're not meditating and they failed and they're not even going to try. I'm here to tell you that there's all kinds of meditation. So there's guided meditation, there is walking meditation, there is laying down meditation, there's meditation that's supposed to help you fall asleep, there's meditation that's literally for 30 seconds. So find what works for you. Find what works for you and do that form of meditation. And just find that time within yourself. And I would say that the last thing is mirror work. And I know that for so many people, it's like the most terrifying thing in the world. And it is maybe the most profound practice that anybody could ever have for any area of their life. Doing mirror work will help with your self-love practice, but it will help with your business. It will help with your relationships, every area. And so get in the mirror, look at yourself in the eyes. That's step one. Get to the point where you can look at yourself in the eyes. That may take some time. It could take months. That's fine. Just practice it. Once you are able to do that, smile at yourself. That's step two. And once you're able to do that, step three is saying, I love you.
Yeah.
And imagine a world, like really think about it. Imagine a world where every being on this planet got up and looked in the mirror and said, I love you to themselves. It would be a profoundly different world than what we live in now. That's a world I want to live in.
Yes. Yes. I'm coming along, please. That sounds incredible. But I love all three of those tools that you've suggested that were really powerful for you, because they are doable, easy. They don't cost anything. You don't have to go anywhere. These are things that every single one of us has at our fingertips available today, right? There's nothing really complex or challenging about this. And I think usually in my experience, it is the simple things like this, the daily simple practices that have the most profound effect over the long term.
Absolutely. And don't wait. Start today.
Yeah.
Start where you are today. I didn't get on the self-love journey of really trying to actively love myself until I was 28 years old. And I thought that I had 6 months to live.
Yeah.
Don't do that to yourself. Start today. And I have to say that, like, loving myself is one of the choices I've made that saved my life. I've been alive now for almost a decade since that diagnosis. And nobody has to get to that point. I don't want anybody ever to get to that point again.
Yeah. 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 And what's funny, because my next question was, if you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be? But I think you just said it. Do not wait. Yeah.
Yeah, don't wait. And other people's opinions are none of your business.
Yeah. Yes.
And they have nothing to do with you. They have literally nothing to do with us. Mm-hmm. When somebody voices an opinion about us, it speaks about them.
Yeah.
Just like when we voice an opinion, it speaks about us.
Yeah.
So other people's opinions have nothing to do with us. And I want everyone to know that, like, I still wake up in the morning sometimes and I'm still worrying about that thing that someone said to me the day before. There are still days when I wake up and I can barely look myself in the eyes in the mirror. Okay. I am not 100%. Nobody is 100% practicing self-love all the time. And I'm still making the effort every day. Okay. It's a journey. Journeys have ups and downs and windy roads, and they have side quests and detours and, make a U-turn here. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Now, I would love to hear how your journey into self-love, this beautiful blossoming that you have gone through, how has this impacted your journey into being an entrepreneur? Because I know inevitably it has. So tell us about that.
Absolutely. So, in every single way, even my business. So my private business name is Soullutions. And I'm in my solo business. I'm a business coach, and self-love is a critical part of it with every entrepreneur I work with. And the reason is because our brains are wired for us to actually achieve our goals in business through self-love. We have a pathway in our brain that is completely dedicated to self-love, that is connected to the areas of our brain that are responsible for motivation, reward, and decision-making, which are critical for business. And when we're not using self-love in our business, we are literally short-circuiting our brain. We are literally using our brain in the hardest way we possibly could. No wonder sometimes it feels hard as an entrepreneur, right? So it's very important in that aspect. And for female entrepreneurs, I offer a 7-week class called You Are the Love of Your Life and a 1-year class called I Am the Love of My Life for those who want to solely focus on the self-love aspect. So those are not business coaching courses. Those are just self-love focused. I also have the great honor and privilege of co-hosting a podcast with the amazing Diana Gremillion. It's called the Body Positivity Podcast, which Katie's going to be on in about a month. We're so excited to have her as a guest. And we put on 3 big conferences a year that are virtual. We also have like a monthly deep dive group, and we are putting out a deck of cards this year and a collaborative book this year. So it's part of everything that I do. And it goes back to how our brains are wired. You know, we're using it, whether we're using our brain all the time, and we can either use it in the way that it's wired, or we can be short-circuiting ourselves, and life's a lot easier if we use it the way it's wired.
Oh my God, yes. Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. And I love that. I know that a lot of my listeners are entrepreneurs, right? Like that is a lot of my network. That's a lot of the audience of this podcast. And that is so key that you talk about how like they go hand in hand. There is a direct connection between self-love and motivation and like doing everything that we need to do when we're in business. And if you're not doing one, you're not going to do the other very well. And they have to go hand in hand. And when you focus on self-love, it hugely impacts that. I absolutely love that connection. And I think most of us suspect that, because when you start leaning into self-love, a lot of other things in your business start feeling easier and a lot of things shift. But I think seeing the direct connection is huge. That's an aha for sure. It's a wake up. Yeah.
Well, and I think the clearest example I have is I ask people, have you ever set a goal in your business and achieved that goal, not acknowledged or celebrated it in any way, and gone right on to the next goal? And almost every entrepreneur raises their hand, and the people that don't, they're probably just not being honest at that moment. And then I asked, and compared to the first goal, how motivated are you to do the second goal? Mm-hmm. And almost everyone says not as motivated or significantly less motivated. And it's because we didn't stop to acknowledge ourselves. We didn't stop to reward ourselves. We didn't stop to celebrate the win that we had. And that's an act of self-love. Yes. And when we don't do that, our motivation drops. So, and when we do it, our motivation goes through the roof. And that's a great example. That is like the perfect example that I have found that shows how self-love directly impacts our ability to show up in our business.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Arliss, if there's somebody listening, sort of, as we're getting ready to wrap up, I'm just conscious of our time here. As we're getting ready to wrap up, if there's somebody listening who is still thinking, okay, I think I'm ready. I think I want to dip my toe in the water. I think I want to explore this connection to self-love and heal this relationship with myself. And if there was one exercise or one practice or one thing that you would recommend they start with, what is that one thing, do you think?
I have to go back to the mirror work.
Okay.
Just look at yourself in the mirror. Try to let go of any judgment, try to let go of any picking apart or criticism or anything. Try to focus just on looking yourself in the eyes in the mirror. Self-acknowledgement and acceptance in there, right, is always the first step to love. It's the first step in love in any relationship. When we acknowledge another person in our life, whether it's our partner or our parents or friend, and we see them, that's when we first feel love, is when we see them, We have to see ourselves.
Mm.
This is a relationship. It's not a switch that flips. It is a relationship. So just start the process and be gentle with yourself. It's not going to look like anybody else's journey. It's not going to look like Katie's journey. It's not going to look like my journey. It's not going to look like Bob's journey. It's going to look like whatever your journey looks like. And just start.
Yeah. Just start. If there's somebody who wants to get in touch with you, find out more about the work that you do as a business coach, or find out about your podcast or wherever, where is the best place for them to sort of go for all of that?
I'm on Facebook, Arliss Dudley-Cash. I believe I'm the only one, since I'm the only one with that name in the world. So if you find me, I talk about both on my Facebook. And then for my business, it's soullutions.com, SOULLUTIONS.com. And you can find out everything that I do there. And if you're interested in listening to the Body Positivity podcast, you can look for the Body Positivity podcast on Facebook as well.
Amazing. And I'll make sure to put the links to all of that in the show notes so that it's really easy to click through. Yeah. Arliss, thank you. I'm so grateful for you coming on today. This conversation has been absolute perfection as far as I'm concerned. You are so full of wisdom. You are so full of light. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and sharing your wisdom with all of us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to be a guest.